Once again, we're back talking about my favorite comic book artist, Mr. Richard Corben, and this is actually episode 12 of my Richard Corben comic collection so far. But this is actually volume 2 of the magazine edition. Now, if you've seen any of my past videos, I've been on a mission to collect everything that Richard Corben did. Well, at least everything in comic book form. I got pretty much really close to the end of my list. As I mentioned in a previous video, there were a handful or so that were really hard to get my hands on, really rare, really expensive, not willing to pay what people are asking for, what I'm seeing them advertised for, or even what I'm seeing them being sold for in the comic shops. So I moved on to magazines. And I was picking up magazines along the way. I wasn't going to focus on magazines at all, but I decided, why not? Because I was coming across them anyway. So the last Richard Corben video I did, it was the first video featuring the magazines, or some of the magazines that I found so far. So I just wanted to do a quick video and show you some other magazines that I picked up along the way. And yeah, that's where we're at. Let's get started with that, okay? So the first magazine I want to show you, this one is from November of 1995. Heavy Metal. And the thing about heavy metal, back in the day when I would come across these things, they would have like some really heavy sci-fi stories or horror stories or just stories in general. And a lot of the art I hated. A lot of the stories were barely even stories. It just depended on what issue I happened to come across. Well, this particular issue is just jam-packed full of great stories. One of them being Richard Corben's story. He actually does, I believe in this issue, there's what is it called? I think it's called Judas, or that might be another issue. But this issue is basically a space sci-fi, if you will, slash horror story in this particular book, and it's pretty cool. And like I said, the bonus is that this magazine is full of other stories, other artists that are really kind of appealing to me. So I definitely enjoy reading this one. And yeah, that's the first one I want to show you. This is 1995. And as you can see, they even put Corben real big up there on the cover. So next up, we're gonna keep it moving with heavy metal. And this is from 1996, March of 1996, Heavy Metal Illustrated. And by the way, for the record, this is not Corben's art. He's on the inside. This one is definitely Richard Corben art. So if we can get a little zoom in there, you can definitely see Richard's style, if you're familiar with his work at all. And that's definitely Den on the cover, his Den character. And I didn't get to flip through this one yet, but I'm pretty sure that this story is going to be about Den. I'm assuming. Excuse me. Den is actually portrayed in a few different titles. It's been featured in a few different titles over the years. But I believe that Heavy Metal was Den's first appearance, and it's probably Richard's signature character, if you will, what he's known for. And it kind of looks like Richard Corben. I think he based that character off of himself. So I'm looking forward to getting into that one. Next up, we're going to go full on into the horror. This is from May of 1974. This is Creepy Magazine. I love Creepy Magazine. I love horror magazines. And I believe this is the story called Judas, which was I believe it's a sci-fi story um, that's got like a little bit of gore and wartime stories in it. Uh, I flipped through it, but I didn't actually read it. But yeah, Richard's known for kind of crossing different storylines and genres, and this one was no different. That's not his artwork on the cover, for the record, but he's definitely featured inside here. I think they put this story like all the way in the back too. The next one I want to show you guys. This is a very interesting magazine. The mighty Frank Frazetta, who also appeared in a lot of the same magazines, the same horror sci-fi magazines that Richard Corben appeared in, actually for a short period of time released his own comic magazine. And so what I'd like to show you is the very first issue of Frank Frazetta's Fantasy Illustrated. And that's his first issue. That is Frank Frazetta's art on the cover there. But he featured a number of different artists. And as you can see, Corbin's up there in the front of the list. And this is from the spring of 1998. I'm not sure how many issues of this came out, but I think it was only maybe a handful or so. It didn't have a very long run. And I definitely have more of these that I'll be showing you in the future. So, but yeah, this is jam packed with fantastic art as well. Um, Sci-fi story in here, Richard does. I believe actually he just does the art, and then there's a different writer who actually does the writing on that story. So a lot of you guys know who Frank Frazetta is. He needs no introduction. He's a legend in the game. All right, next up, we're going back to heavy metal again. This is October of 1977. Crazy cover. Not Richard Corben art, but again, he is featured on the inside here. I have not gotten a chance to look at this one. I wish I had a little bit more dialogue, but I am super, super behind on a lot of my reading for the. I've been accumulating these Richard Corben books so fast. It's just been unbelievable. So I haven't had a chance to look through this one yet, but any of the old heavy metals are like the best ones, especially if you can find them from the 70s and 80s. In my opinion, those were the best issues. So haven't looked at a whole lot of the newer issues at all. But don't come across them much. I mean, you can still buy them brand new on the newsstand, but I think these days they're like something crazy, like $14 an issue. That's crazy. Next up, one of my favorite sci-fi magazines. I go way back with this magazine. This is from June of 1978. This is the first issue of 1984 magazine. 1984 magazine was probably one of the best, or at least one of the top sci-fi comic magazines out there. And they eventually went to 1994. Not sure what the story is behind that, but this was a cool find. And as you can see, that's definitely your classic Richard Corben art on there. Classic cover. I remember this from my childhood. Shockingly, this first issue is actually a lot more common and a lot cheaper than some of the later issues. When do you ever see that happen? Okay, the next one. This is very interesting. When I first saw this book, I actually thought it was comic book size. So, of course, I ordered it. And when I got it, I was a little surprised that, oh, this is actually a magazine. And this kind of threw me off when I first saw it. But I'm so glad because this is like a really pricey, one of the pricier Corben books to find, at least at the time it was. A lot of books I bought actually dropped in price, you know, of course, right after I bought them. This was one of them. I've seen this cheaper than for what I paid. But this is Richard Corben's From the Pit. And this was from his publishing company, Fatangor. Um, this is some of his earliest work. And if you just take a look at that art on there, I mean, boy, nobody was touching Richard back in those days. Issue number one. I don't think there was another issue. This was a one shot. Um, he also had some H.P. Lovecraft stuff in there, Rat in the Walls and whatnot. But wow, look at that. Look at that art. Man, that is so cool. So I was really, really happy to add this to the collection because it's a must. If you are a Corben fan, it is a must to have his Fanagor Press stuff, where he could do whatever he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. He didn't have any restrictions or boundaries that the comic code would have put upon him. And so this is the stuff to get. If there was anything, any of Richard's work that I would recommend, it would definitely be the Fanagor Press stuff, first and foremost. Ooh. Ooh. Creepy crawly things flying around out here in the desert. Okay, next up, another one of my favorite comic book magazines. This is November 1976, issue number 79 of Eerie magazine. Eerie and creepy. When it came to the horror books, nobody was touching them. I don't care what anybody says. These just bring so many fond memories from my childhood of just, you know, grabbing these magazines, or more so I was coming across them. I never bought any of these magazines. I don't even know if they would sell a horror magazine to a kid back in the 70s. And I was a kid back then. I could barely buy a piece of gum at that age. But this particular one is another sports issue. And on a previous video, I showed you the iconic cover with the baseball player who's like a skeleton in a baseball uniform. And this was another one where they kind of focused on sports. And of course, Richard Corben did a story in here. Yeah, so this will forever be one of the most iconic Eerie magazine covers, and as far as I'm concerned, one of the most iconic comic magazine covers in comic history. There you go. Okay, next up. This one is very cool. I'm glad I got my hands on this one. This is a newer book. This is from January of 2022. This is called Vampirus Carmilla. What issue is this? Does it say? Issue number 6 of Vampirus Carmilla. And if you look, this is definitely Corben art there on the cover. Look at all of that. And if you look right down here in the top corner, it says Richard Corben's final cover art. So this was the last comic book cover, or I guess the last cover at all that Richard Corben was featured on. And it's beautiful. I mean, look at that. And so you can imagine what's on the inside there. Man, classic artwork by a classic guy. All right. Next up, we have December 1978. Back to heavy metal once again. And this is another one I haven't gotten a chance to flip through, but I am guessing it's either a Den story or probably when he moved on to do a lot more sci-fi stuff for Heavy Metal magazine. I think he did a Sinbad run and some other stuff, but this is cool, and you can see that this was a subscription basis back in the day. with all the posters. That's actually on the actual cover. Unfortunately, I can't remove any of that, but it's cool. It's cool. Then, you know, if somebody steals this, then I know who got it when I see that, right? All right, so now we're back with another classic creepy magazine. This is issue number 103. It's from November of 1978. Creepy magazine. I did read this, but for the life of me, I can't remember what actually what this story was about. Obviously, it has to do something with horror in some fashion, but I'm not exactly sure. And I've been, you know, a lot of these creepy magazines are like really expensive. There's a few shops in town and they're like 30, 40 bucks. Some of them are way up there. And I'm not trying to spend that kind of money, but I've been finding some really, really good deals between some of the shops in town and some of the websites on the internet. I've been finding them for 4, 5, $6 right around in that range. So by the time I pay shipping, then you know you're looking at probably a 10, $12 book. But that's better than paying 20, 30, 40 bucks for it. So I've been real fortunate. A lot of the Eerie magazines, same thing. You know, though the resale value is pretty high up there. So I was happy to get my hands on this. Again, the stuff from the 70s is definitely the better stuff in my book, especially when it comes to Corben's art. All right, we got one more to show you before we end this particular video. We're going to end it with yet another heavy metal magazine. This is from March of 1979. By the way, that's not Corben art on the outside, but he is featured on the inside. Back to our last magazine, Heavy Metal, March 1979. And check that cover out. Not Corben art, but definitely another interesting cover for this iconic magazine. Another one, I don't have any dialogue about the insides of this one either because I haven't yet gotten to it. But I have begun to read some of the comic series, and so you guys can look forward to me breaking down some of those stories in some of those books. But for right now, we'll just end it with this heavy metal. Again, this is what is it? Episode number 12 of my Richard Corben comic book collection. But episode number 2 or volume 2 or however you want to word that of the magazine editions. There's more magazines coming because I do have more magazines, and there might be some other stuff coming Richard Corben wise too, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got for right now. Thank you for joining me. This is Daryl D, Daryl D TV, and we'll see you back next time for another edition of my Richard Corben comic collection so far. Till then, you guys stay safe. Peace.